Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fifth, I believe, Athlete Development Workshop. Today's session is on sports marketing and brand management. And please ensure that you turn off your mics during the presentation and you put them on when you're asking a question or answering a question. Today's presenter is Miss Marcia Boyce. A little about Miss Boyce. Marcia Boyce is an avid sports fan with a passion for all things communication related. She has over a decade of experience in the sporting industry in media and public relations, having worked with several organizations, including the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, Pro Sports, and the Caribbean Regional Anti-Doping Organization. The former sports reporter is a current co-host of This Just In sports show, as well as a content editor for the Drive Face podcast. Academically, Marsha holds qualifications in media and communications and sports management, and has been a part-time tutor in the BSc Sports Sciences program at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. Her goals include making a significant impact on the sporting landscape in her native Barbados and by extension, the Caribbean. With this in mind, her research interests span the areas of sport development, media and communication, women in sport, sports governance, and anti-doping. She currently sits on Barbados' Olympic Association's Women in Sport Commission and also assists with various projects of the National Olympic Academy. So this is a little about Ms. Boyce, and she'll take over from here.
Thank you very much, Sharnil, and thank you everyone for joining, as well as a special thank you to the Saint Lucia Basketball Federation for extending this invitation for me to be a part of your athlete development workshop sessions. Now, today we're going to look at two very important topics in the world of sport, marketing and more specifically, brand management, and we're going to touch on a few key areas. So in terms of what we'll be doing, we're going to look at some sport marketing and branding basics. We're also going to look at the fostering strategic alignment and fostering strategic partnerships, as well as corporate social responsibility and community relations. Most of the questions I'll take at the end. So if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to jot them down and we'll go right through them. And I say that because the answer to your question might come up in a later slide, so we can take all of the questions at the end if that doesn't happen. Sharnil mentioned my background, so I don't need to go back through that, but just know I am indeed an avid sports fan and someone who has a passion for sports and communications and everything related to those areas. Right, so let's get right down to it. You know, what is sports marketing? We hear the term, but what does it really mean? This is your basic academic definition of the activities designed to meet the wants and needs of sport consumers through some kind of exchange process, with sport consumers being anybody who consumes a sport product, from spectators, fans, your sponsors, your players and participants. All of these different individuals constitute sport consumers. And when we talk about sport marketing, it can be divided into two basic thrusts: the marketing of sport products and services directly to the consumer. So as a basketball federation, basketball is your product, which you market directly to your players, your spectators, and so forth. But there's also the marketing of non-sport products through sport and sport promotions. And this tends to be the area people think about when we say sport marketing, you know, using sport to promote other things. People also focus on the 5 P's of sports marketing, those being product, price, place, promotion, and public relations. Promotion, again, being the one that most readily comes to mind when we think about marketing. So what about branding? From an organizational standpoint, brands can be created. They are retained in the names, logos, marks, designs, images that an organization might have. The brand name and branding is really what sets an organization apart from everything else that exists. Other organizations, other products, other services, your branding is what sets you apart because your branding leads to name awareness and recognition. Um, there is a strong emotional and mental association made with your organization through your brand. There's perceived brand quality through your brand, as well as it's a way to foster consumer loyalty. Now, speaking specifically for athletes, personal branding is very key for modern day athletes. And you see here a quote from the IOC's Athlete Centered Resource Hub, Athlete 365. Your personal brand is how you market yourself. Your personal brand is unique to you. Whether it involves interviews with select parts of the media, managing your digital presence, or creating sponsorship deals with exciting and innovative companies, you are in control of your personal brand. And that is basically what we are going to focus on today, both from an organizational standpoint as well as an individual athlete standpoint. Because if you think about it, particularly for professional athletes, this is how they make their money. You make a lot of your money from corporate endorsements and various sponsorship deals, etc. So having a very strong, unique, and favorable association is important for athletes. And athletes can create that strong positive or negative association both on and off the court, the field, or the track. So it isn't only limited to what you do on the field of play, but also what you do off the field of play as well. Central then to creating your brand as an athlete or an organization is your brand story. You need to know your story, know who you are, know what you do, know why you do it. So for example, as an organization, are you a high performance entity? Are you a mass participation entity? Is your focus on sport for all? Are you a community club? Are you a national organization? All of these things factor into understanding who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do. As an athlete, are you a club player, a national player, a multi-sport competitor, a fitness enthusiast? You know, you need to know what you did, what you are currently doing, what you plan to do, and not only know it, but be able to articulate it. What's your history? What's your backstory? As an organization, what stage of your development are you currently at? Are you a new organization? Are you an established organization? Are you a developing organization, an organization in transition? All of these elements are important to your story. And storytelling is at the heart of marketing. And sport has no shortage of stories. You know, we all love a good story as it relates to sport. And I also like to tell athletes that you are the best person to tell your own story. You know what you go through every day. You know your struggles, you know your triumphs. There are things that someone might see as a disappointment for you that might, for you personally, be a great achievement. So you are the best person to tell your story because you understand it best and you know everything that goes on behind the scenes. And linked to your story is your brand imagery or your brand legacy. What do people think when they think about you? And this goes for an organization or an athlete. What do they associate you with? That narrative is what you want to craft. For an organization, this also includes who are your stars? What competitions and events do you hold? What are you known for? Particularly as it relates to stars, we find in the Caribbean that our sporting federations tend not to market their sports stars enough. And sometimes the average spectator, or I should say the average member of the population, doesn't really or isn't really able to identify the star basketball player or the leading female netballer, etc. So as organizations, we need to do a lot more to market our stars and make them the faces of our sport, because sport is essentially about people. People watch sport to see other people compete, and that is what draws them in, whether it is the level of athletic ability, whether it's the backstory. All of these things are important when we're talking about sports marketing. Another major part of creating and managing your brand, cultivating your brand story, is authenticity. And I can't stress this enough. Being authentic is key. You need to be yourself as an individual. Let your personality shine through. You also want to make sure that your TV persona and or your online persona matches what you present in real life. Where being authentic also works is because it allows you to set yourself apart from the crowd. You know, what makes you unique, what makes you different. And you don't just want to copy others or do things just because other people or other organizations are doing it. It must be something that is relevant and authentic to you. On the other hand, even if other people are doing similar things or other organizations are doing similar things, no one will do it exactly like you. That is why being authentic and staying true to yourself is very important. So you need to consider, okay, as an athlete, what makes me unique? What makes me different from my teammates? What makes me different from any other club basketballer in St. Lucia? What makes me different from the other national players? As a federation, what makes me unique from the other federations in St. Lucia? Or what makes me unique from the other basketball federations in the region? And the answers to these questions help you then to craft and cultivate that brand story. The media is a very integral part of sport, both at the amateur level and the professional level. And the media can play a very important role in helping athletes as well as organizations to market their brands and build their brand story now on a national scale. So there are various types of media interaction. You could have interviews, news conferences, actual event coverage, news releases, features, campaigns. You can interact with the media as an athlete or an organization on several different levels or via several different types of interaction. Now, media relations can have an impact on public opinion, an impact on public sentiment. You know, you can use the media to get the public on your side or to garner support, public support for a particular issue or a particular cause. But it is also good to foster good relationships with media entities and members of the media themselves. Now, in the Caribbean, most of our sporting organizations don't have big advertising budgets, if they have our advertising budgets at all, and they rely then very heavily on the media to get their message across, to promote their activities, to let people know what is happening within the association. You know, it is largely not-for-profit, volunteer dependent organizations. Most of the funding might come from government or the Olympic Committee, maybe a sponsor, and so forth. So it is very important then to foster good relationships with the media and media personnel. And this includes being accessible both in good and bad times, because you'll find, you know, everybody wants to talk to the media when things are going good. But when things aren't going so good, you know, you tend to shy away, people try to hide. No, but if you're fostering and developing good relationships, you want to be available and accessible for good news as well as bad news. And there are several benefits to developing these good relationships with the media, and increased media coverage can raise the public profile of both an organization or an athlete. It makes them then more attractive to sponsors because there are more eyes on you, more people know about you, more people are coming to your games, etc. So then that attracts more sponsors, more corporate partners, and ultimately can lead to an organization generating more revenue or to an athlete gaining a sponsor or long-term partner. So you don't want to shy away from doing interviews. These are all opportunities, for example, to share your brand story. Now, having said all of that, you need to bear in mind that the media houses are not a PR firm. They're not going to be your personal or individual PR firm. Their job, first and foremost, is to cover the news. So it is your job then as an athlete or as an organization to make sure what you are doing is newsworthy to generate that kind of coverage. You also want to be proactive in your relationship with the media. Don't just wait for them to turn up to ask you questions or for something to happen for you then to have to generate a response. You want to be proactive. You want to essentially send the news their way. So pitch story ideas. You want to let them know what's happening, sending out your fixtures, your results, etc. If you're an athlete getting ready for a scholarship or preparing for a major tournament, pitch those those story ideas to media personnel to have that coverage generated. You can suggest interviews, you can suggest topics for features. Also important, particularly for organizations, is to have information readily accessible. Team sheets, player bios, statistical information, all of these things go a long way in making the job of the media easier. They allow for you to add body and depth to a story when this kind of information is easily accessible. And then it long term helps you to foster those relationships. Also, it is important to be proactive. You want to get ahead of any controversies that might occur. You don't want to hide away. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit more on that as we go through. Now, talking about digital and social media, this could be a session on its own. Social media has become such an invaluable tool for us in our current society. It is virtually seen as a must know in this day and age. If you're an athlete, you must have a social media account. If you're an organization, you must have some kind of presence on social media. Now, social media platforms are the first stop for news and information for many people. So you want to be where people are. It is a great place to connect, to share, to motivate, and to inspire. And these are all very important areas, especially for athletes looking to build their brand and connect with others. And authenticity is also important here. So even as you are an athlete, there are other people who might be interested in, okay, your athlete life, your training regime, your nutrition, what it is like during training, your preparation, even your struggles. Those sharing that kind of information helps you to connect with your fan base and grow your fan base by letting them see that, you know, you are a person. You find sometimes that, especially for elite athletes, people tend to divorce the notion of an elite athlete with, you know, that person actually being a human being. And then you see it come up when athletes share their mental health struggles and they get backlash and so forth. But you are first and foremost a human being. So sharing that human connection is important. And you may ask, why social media? You know, why must I be in this space? Why should I share these things? But if you are interested in cultivating your brand, managing your brand, these different platforms offer numerous benefits, both for the individual and the organization. They offer opportunities to build relationships. They offer the opportunities to build brand awareness and brand loyalty. You get the opportunity to share information and to educate your community, your fan base, your followers about your sports, about your discipline, or about you as a person. For an organization, a lot of these platforms offer the opportunity for you to stream and share live content, which can be important. You might not have a massive production budget when you're having a tournament or so forth, but a lot of these platforms allow for live streaming, even in the sense of live interviews, where you can then connect with your audience or showcase your athletes on and off the court through interviews with your audience. There are also opportunities to generate revenue directly from some of these platforms through advertising and so forth. So generally though, particularly as individuals, you want to be very responsible with your usage. You want to be wary of what you post, what you like, what you share, what you retweet, especially for national players, because then sometimes what you post can then become a story in itself for the media. And that is not something you want. You don't want to be on your social media platforms, you know, blasting your coach, or as an executive member, you don't want to be on social media complaining about your other board members and so forth, because then those things become news content. You also want to be aware of, from a personal perspective, that notion of my profile private, I can post whatever I feel like posting. No, your profile might be private, but you might just be one screenshot, one screen recording, one screen grab away from a potential controversy. Because while your profile might be private, not everybody who is following you might have your best interest at heart, and could easily screenshot, screen record, and share that thing that you thought, okay, was private in this safe space. For young athletes, especially those who might be looking to go after athletic scholarships and so forth, you want to be aware, especially of the things that you post, the type of language that you use. You don't want to be using foul language and so forth, because increasingly we are seeing a number of athletes losing potential scholarships based on content on their social media platforms. So if you are an athlete looking to go off on scholarship, or a member of your organization who is in charge of preparing such athletes for those opportunities, just do a social media audit. You go through profiles and you see what is there, what needs to be deleted, what needs to be cleaned up, because you don't want something that you post to jeopardize what could be an opportunity of a lifetime. So you think about what you post. Does it genuinely reflect who you are, both as an individual or an organization? And will this post come back to haunt me? Those are some guiding principles which you could use. But there are other considerations now when we're looking more into the business end of digital and social media. And I include digital because we're not only speaking about Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, but YouTube would fall under this category, because YouTube isn't traditionally considered a social media platform, but more digital media platform, as well as websites and so forth, blogs, your vlogs, all of these things would fall under this category. So there are other things you want to consider when you want to maximize your digital presence to help build your brand as an athlete or an organization. It must be strategic. You don't want to be posting just for posting's sake. Why are you posting? What are you trying to achieve? Especially as an organization, you want your social media strategy to align with your organization's overall strategy. What are your objectives? What are your deliverables? What key performance indicators are you trying to meet? And how can social media then help you in meeting them? Some other considerations. It is cost effective, particularly for advertising and promotions. You could do a posting in Canva, share it on your Instagram, whereas to have that same ad printed in the newspaper or converted to audio or visuals for radio or television can get very expensive. So particularly for promotions, it is very cost effective, but it can also be extremely time consuming. So when you think about how a common question is, well, how frequently should I post? That all depends on what you're trying to achieve, as well as the platform that you're using. So for example, on Instagram, posting maybe once a day up to 3 times a week might be fine. For YouTube, you might get away with once a week or once every 2 weeks. But for a platform like Twitter, you might need to post multiple times a day to generate the kind of engagement that you want. So in terms of the time consuming nature of social media, that is something you need to consider. And that leads me into the next point of platform choice. You don't have to be everywhere. There are 1,000,001 social media platforms, and you don't have to be on all of them. Pick 1, 2, 3, which are how many ever you think you can manage. And then you just want to be consistent. That's the key with social media, being consistent, having consistent posts. Determine where the audience you want to reach, where they are, and go there. Also bear your various resources and skills in mind. Okay, it's fine to say, yes, I want a YouTube channel, but do you have the resources to populate a YouTube channel? Do you have a camera? Do you have time to be filming? Can you edit? Do you have the skills and capabilities to edit video and so forth? So be honest with yourself in terms of your platform choice and the resources available to you. You also want to consider the demographic that you're looking to attract. If you're looking for a younger demographic, now Instagram and TikTok might be the place for your content. Whereas if you're looking for an older demographic, especially in the Caribbean, Facebook might be a better bet. So it all depends on where your audience is, which demographic you're trying to appeal to. And as an individual, You also want to focus on where you like to interact. As an athlete, you don't want to be that you don't enjoy, because there has to be some enjoyment in it for you to be consistent, for you to keep doing it. So which platform do you like? And then as an athlete, and you can determine to make that your home, so to speak. Also consider presence versus engagement. Having a social media account or a social media channel is not enough. You need to engage on your various platforms, whether you engage in an audience, you're engaging your followers, your fans, etc. The aim is to build a vibrant online community. Also, because these platforms are governed by algorithms, and in some cases, algorithms keep changing. Sometimes you can't keep up, but the algorithms, especially for example, Instagram, they favor engagement. So the more people engage with your respective post, the more people then get to see it, because then the algorithm reads this particular post as content people want to see, and then they'll push it to more people. Just because someone follows you, that does not mean they actually see your content if they don't engage with your platform or with your account. So you have direct access to the people you want to reach. So the aim now is to engage them on a consistent basis. As an organization, you also want to engage on social media, because it is a great place to get very immediate feedback on an initiative or change. People can immediately tell you what they think about something, because the emphasis of digital media use is on two-way communication. You don't just want to put something out there and just leave it up. You want that engagement. You want to build a conversation. You want to build a relationship. You also want to be able to leverage your content. And this shows the importance of keeping records, having pictures, having video, because you actually need content to populate these sites or these channels, particularly for an organization. Yes, your season might run from, let's say, August to November, but then you have December right away down to July that you still need to keep the conversation going. So what content are you leveraging? Do you have archival material? Do you have stats? Do you have records that can tell you, okay, on this day in 1980, Saint Lucia competed for the first time in basketball at this major championship? All of that information is important to help you populate your various accounts and channels and so forth. You also need to consider, for those athletes or organizations that have sponsors and partners, do you use your platforms to leverage your sponsors? Do you post your sponsors' content directly on your platform, extending the reach and so forth for them? So the image you can see on the right, it's a little bit blurry, but this was a screenshot from the Netball Jamaica page in the build up to the last Netball World Cup. This was 2019, I think it was. And Red Strike, the water company, etc., were among their sponsors. So not only did you see their game content, their behind the scenes, their fixtures and so forth, they directly leveraged their platforms to the benefit of their sponsors. Because, you know, in the lead up to a World Cup being one of the favorites, there will be more traffic to their page. So it offers more visibility for their sponsors. So that is something you can also consider, to leverage your individual account to the benefit of your sponsor. And we're going to talk about sponsor benefits in a moment. This notion of social versus traditional media, there is, especially internationally, that social media is gaining more traction and traditional media is waning out somewhat. However, for us in the Caribbean, we are still heavily dependent on traditional media to get the message out. We're also still heavily dependent on traditional media for credibility. You know, sometimes people wait until they see something on television or read about it in the newspaper to take it as, okay, yes, this thing is a big deal because I heard the ad on the radio or I saw the video on television, etc. So there's still that level of credibility that traditional media offers. But what social media does is lessen the reliance on traditional media here in the Caribbean. So you now have direct access to your consumers, your fans, and you don't necessarily have to wait on the media to get your message out there. So if you're having an event, you don't have to wait until a sports reporter turns up and records the video or writes an article for it to come out in the newspaper for people to know, okay, what happened last night at basketball. You can do that real time as the game progresses, giving quarter by quarter updates, top scorers, etc. If you want to go the full Monty of doing live text commentary, play by play, there is that avenue as well. So social media gives you that outlet to lessen your reliance on traditional media. Websites for me are also very important. I always say if you can afford a website, and this goes for individual athletes looking to build their brand, as well as organizations. If you can afford a website and there are some budget-friendly options that you can go after, do it. Simply because you do not own your social media platform. Technically, if you read the terms and conditions, you don't even own the content on your social media platforms. Those are owned by Instagram, Facebook, etc., etc. If Facebook or Instagram decides to shut down tomorrow, pack up shop, we're done with that. Without notice, what would that mean for your organization? Would your organization cease to exist in a digital context? Would people not be able to find you? And that is why I would also encourage athletes looking to build their individual brand, as well as sporting organizations, national federations, etc., to develop their own websites, because you own your website content, you have more control over what happens. And then what you can do is use your social media platforms to push traffic to your website, but you want that permanent presence and not to be beholden to the various social media platforms. Let's say there might be a day where you have a major championship game and you're planning to stream, and that day Facebook goes down. What do you then do? So you always want to have more of a permanence, and you get that in a website. So as we go forward, you can see a recurring theme here when we're talking about sports marketing and brand management is about building relationships, building a fan base, building your participant base as an organization, building your volunteer base, because sometimes volunteers are a category that's often overlooked. Social media and traditional media are key in helping you to build these various areas. You need to know who your audience is, who comprises your audience, what can you give to them, how do they like to be communicated to, what is your tone? Is it informal? Is it memes and jokes? Is it more formal? A more formal tone to the text on your social media profiles, etc. Or you might find your spectator base or your fan base, depending on the nature of your sport, might actually prefer email blasts where they can get all of the information in one single email, as opposed to having to go through multiple individual posts on a social media platform to get what they want. So it's about knowing your base and what they want and how best to communicate with them. Relationships are built through consistent and sustained engagement with various groups. So in the case of an athlete, your fans, your supporters, your community, your sponsors are all categories, are all stakeholders for you to engage with constantly. And you can do this through social media, through traditional media, through direct communication, face-to-face meetings, etc. For an organization, you have various internal and external stakeholders. These could be staff, management, your players, your volunteers, the media, government entities, your Olympic committee, all different stakeholders which you need to keep constantly engaged. And these all help to strengthen your brand when you are easily recognizable and easily recognizable for the right thing in different areas. So now I'm going to use Darren Sammy as an example of the next area we're going to go into, and that's strategic alignment. Sammy is the face of Chairman's Reserve Liquor, as well as his own cologne line, 88, which is primarily in the Indian market. But both of these products align well, if not seamlessly, with the persona that Darren Sammy portrays both as a cricketer and then in his life outside the field, outside of the field, that suave, self-assured, confident individual.
You imagine, you believe, and then you achieve. The power is in me. And now, it's with you. Rise to greatness. Wear your attitude. Darren Sammy by Asghar Ali.
And the language there with the ad saying wearing your attitude, that fits in line with his persona, 88 being his West Indies jersey number. So as a player, you can maybe build an entire brand around your jersey number. You see it in basketball, you see it in Premier League football, for example, CR7, basketball, everybody knows 23 for either LeBron James or Michael Jordan, so forth. You can build entire brands around, or an entire story around your jersey number as a player. So these are all areas to look at when we're talking about building your brand, but also aligning yourself with products and entities that fit with who you are as an individual. So when we talk about strategic alignment, you can't have a discussion about sport marketing or brand management without considering strategic alignment. And any activity or initiative that you undertake, whether it's PR, marketing, communications, it doesn't exist in a silo. It doesn't exist in isolation. So as we mentioned earlier, what are your goals and objectives? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to increase your revenue as an organization? Are you trying to increase your membership or the number of players that you have? As an athlete, are you trying to attract a sponsor? Are you trying to gain more local support? The aim then is in any partnership or activity that you pursue, it strategically aligns with whatever it is you are trying to achieve. So when we talk about partnerships and sponsorships, these play a big part in the sporting industry. And generally, the current industry trend is to shy away from even using the term sponsorship and lean more heavily toward partnership, because it suggests a more mutually beneficial relationship where every party involved benefits, and not necessarily a pure sponsorship or a donation where somebody is just handing you a check and getting nothing in return. That era of donation and handouts is pretty much over, and companies now are focusing on meeting their needs and getting a return on their investment. So when we're looking at a partnership or a sponsorship, it should be a mutually beneficial relationship with the athlete and their potential partner or sponsor, or the organization and their potential partner or sponsor. It should be a win-win situation where everybody involves benefits, as I said. Companies now focus on that return on investment. Okay, if I invest this $10,000, $20,000, $100,000 in you or your organization, what will I get in return? How will I benefit? And you need to be able to articulate to an organization how they will benefit via a partnership or sponsorship with you. We also look at synergies. Where's the link? What's the commonality between the two? If, let's say, from an organizational perspective, and you're looking for a partner in a corporate entity, or is it that you both are new entities? Is it that you are an established entity and they're a new entrant to the market looking to gain some market share? Where is the synergy there? Is it a new brand partnering with an established sporting organization? Is it a sport that relies heavily on technology, partnering with a technological or computer or digital partner? All of those things, you look for that natural synergy. As an athlete, do you actually use the company's products and services? Can you benefit for them? Do you find it helpful? Will your audience find these things helpful? These are all things to consider when we're looking to engage in partnerships and sponsorship. Closely linked with that is an alignment with your brand and your values. You want to choose your partners very carefully, both as an athlete and an organization, because who you align yourself with can either enhance or harm your image. So you want to be very careful with that. So let's say as a basketball federation putting on a summer camp, you might not necessarily want to have a sponsor that is an alcohol brand or a cigarette brand, for argument's sake. Or as an athlete, it makes no sense to have a liquor sponsor, but you don't drink alcohol. So those are things you need to consider when we're talking about alignment with your brand and alignment with your values. Authenticity also plays a part here, because as an athlete, you might become the face of a brand, as we see here with the Grace ambassadors in Jamaica, Grace Foods. They have ambassadors like Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, Brianna Williams, and Hansel Parchment. You might become the face of a brand. Can you truly represent what this brand stands for or this entity stands for? Does it align with your personal philosophy? So all of these are considerations if you're an athlete looking to enter into sponsorship and partnership agreements. And then, are you comfortable with how that brand will leverage your image, for argument's sake? So like, for example, with Grace, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, she features in their commercials, etc., particularly their Christmas commercials, as a part of her contract being their brand ambassador. But she also looks as if she enjoys doing it. So that kind of alignment is important. We touched on demographics. Your target market and your demographic is also important when looking for partners and sponsors. You want to know, for example, who your fans are, who your spectators are, and which brands would they then appeal to. If you have primarily, let's say, junior athletes, you might not necessarily find a symbiotic partnership with a car dealer or car dealership, etc. You might more find a natural partnership with a beverage manufacturer or a biscuit company, things that might be of immediate use to your target audience. So you bear that in mind, who your demographic is and which brands are also looking to go after that particular demographic and strike up a partnership on that basis. There are also endorsements where athletes are paid to promote a product or a service and their name and likeness is used. This is very common in the US and professional sport. It is an avenue for athletes to generate significant revenue. And from a local perspective, you can start smaller. So it might not be that you can attract a Digicel or a Flow immediately off the back, but you can partner with a smaller company or a company looking to launch a new product, a new entity looking to enter into the market in a demographic that you are a part of. The environment is also very important because the environment is very saturated. When you think about it, you are one sporting federation competing with all the other sporting federations, all the different clubs. Then you have schools, then you have social causes, community groups, all competing in very small islands for the same sponsorship dollar. So it becomes even more important for you to be able to show partners and sponsors what benefit you can offer to them. How will they benefit from a partnership with you, and be able to articulate that clearly. How can you extend, reach for that brand? Is it that you have a massive fan base? Is it that you have lots of spectators? Is it a case where you have your own venue and you can plaster images all across the venue? Do you get extensive media coverage? Therefore, any sponsor will benefit from the media coverage that you get. All of these are things to consider. What reach can you offer for your partners? And then to top it all off, a good proposal. A good proposal is very important because, as we mentioned, the market is very saturated and you need to set yourself apart from that crowd. A lot of companies will get tons of donation and sponsorship requests daily. So you want to move away from just sending in that donation letter and instead prepare a well-documented proposal outlining the benefits to potential sponsors and partners. If possible, make a presentation, because it is one thing to put your ideas down in text and images, but making a face-to-face presentation, you get to sell your passion. You get to really answer any questions or explain anything in more detail that would not be adequately captured in text or video. Invite potential sponsors or actual sponsors and partners to your events. Sometimes you find an organization might reach out to a sponsor, you get the check, and that's it. You don't invite them to the actual tournament. You don't invite them to the awards. The next set of communication you have with them is when you want another check next year. Those days are done. You need to build sustained relationships. And you can even take that a step further, where you meet sponsors, you meet partners, and see what they have in mind and how the parties can benefit. And you want to follow up with continued engagement. Remember, we're talking about building relationships. You can offer incentives. So for example, if your sponsor is, let's say, I don't know, a beverage company, just calling a random thing, a beverage company. As an organization, Basketball Federation, you can then be in charge of crafting the fun day for that organization or creating team building activities for that organization. If you have a summer camp that is sponsored, make allowances for the children of staff from your sponsor's organization to be able to attend or attend at a discounted rate and so forth. So you want to build those relationships and continue that engagement right away through. And then following on closely from that, as I just keep an eye on the time, it's all about creativity and innovation, especially, as I said, because the market is so saturated and we are very small spaces. Being willing to create events and initiatives with your partners in mind will set you apart. Being able to, yes, you might think, okay, I'm going to approach this person to sponsor my first division tournament. But after you sit down and you talk with them, you might realize, okay, you know what, they're more interested in younger demographic, youth development. I have a budding junior program. They might more be interested in sponsoring or coming on board as a major partner for our yearly summer camp, etc. The aim is to get that revenue into the organization. So you look for those creative ways in which you can do that. You want to leverage partnerships to showcase the brands, but not only showcase the brands, but showcase them in an authentic way. Integrate that relationship and that partnership into what you do. Not every brand will align with what your organization is about. It's not a one size fits all. So you don't necessarily want to force a partnership. Product integration is important, especially for organizations who own their own venue. You have more leeway to offer more creative avenues for your potential sponsors and partners, which might also extend to use of your venue for their various activities and initiatives and so forth. Or you can look for what we call non-traditional partner categories. You might own your own venue. A good sponsor for you to come on board might be, let's say, a cleaning company or a power washing company, because at the end of the day, this is still something that carries an administrative cost for you. And if you can have that cost offset by a partner who comes, cleans the wall, and then having that sparkling clean wall, for argument's sake, is virtually a walk-in advertisement for them. So you want to explore those non-traditional partner categories. Collaborations are important, and it is something I find we don't do a lot of in the Caribbean. You can collaborate and partner with other sporting disciplines. Basketball and netball, for example, can come together to hold initiatives, to do certain activities, could have joint preseason training, things like that. As an individual athlete, you can partner with other athletes within your sporting discipline or outside of your sporting discipline in different disciplines to create a group that might then, as an individual, you might not have the depth of star power, but a group of athletes might offer greater depth and star power, which might be more attractive to a corporate sponsor. It might include, making a joint bid for sponsorship for two organizations, sharing volunteers to help offset costs, reduction in prices for people who attend both sports. So if you go basketball on Monday, you get a reduction on your ticket price for netball on Tuesday, and so forth. That way you can grow your spectator base by partnering with another sporting entity and so forth, holding a joint community event, etc. Activation really comes into play when you already have a sponsor on board. You want to create or have creative ways to work with that sponsor that doesn't openly scream, oh, this is an ad, I am selling you this product in your face. You want to create an activity or a competition, etc., that meets your sponsor's needs. So it might not even be your Division 1 tournament. It might be a preseason tournament. It might be a postseason initiative, etc. It can help whatever that brand is to come to life in a very natural environment where the company then gets to interact with the various members of the target market they're trying to interact with on the ground at a game or at an event hosted by your organization. Merchandising is also an area where we tend not to do a lot of here in the Caribbean. Here's three examples really. The Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee for Rio 2020, they did some lovely shirts that were all sold out. And even this year for Tokyo, everybody was asking, are you doing more shirts? Are you doing more shirts? We tend not to have a lot of sport paraphernalia for sale in the Caribbean. But if you think about it, sport is very tribal. Sport gives people identity. People like to identify with a particular team. So having that paraphernalia available, that jersey, that hat, that cap, etc., that people can purchase generates revenue for your organization or for an athlete who has a fan base, while extending your brand story and helping to give fans a visible means of associating with you. The pictures at the bottom are from a physiotherapist here in Barbados, Sports Therapy 101. And it was a very practical approach to merchandising because, okay, as a physiotherapist, you will use exercise bands, you will use straps, you will use skipping ropes, etc. There is a market for these things generally. So you brand these things and offer them for sale because people will buy them regardless because they're useful, they're practical items. So these are all things that sporting entities and individuals can consider. You know, it's not only about novelty items, but very practical items that people can use can be branded and put up for sale. In this day and age, everybody has to wear a face mask to go most places. So something as simple as having a branded face mask can help generate income for you as an athlete or an organization. The picture in the top was a setup at the Pan Am Games in Lima in 2019. One of the sponsors was Head and Shoulders. So, and immediately you might not immediately think about, okay, well, the relationship between a shampoo and sport is not that obvious. But again, we're talking about tapping into those non-traditional partner categories. And when we think about sport, we think about image, especially as sport is more televised. Athletes are also proud of their image and they want to look a particular way when you are competing. So with Head and Shoulders being one of the sponsors, they actually set up a full barber station. You could go get your hair cut, get your hair washed, etc. This was right outside, well, in the venue complex that housed volleyball, I think swimming, baseball, and a couple other events. So there were multiple venues in this sporting complex, and people, you know, there were troves of people lining up because it was free, as Head and Shoulders was one of the sponsors too. So, and it gave them a place where you could interact with the brand in a very organic way, in a very natural setting, being there to watch the sport. So moving toward the end, corporate social responsibility is also a very important part of sport marketing and brand management. CSR is basically what an organization or individual, but more organization does to positively impact its community. It falls largely under the public relations banner, where the focus is to shape some kind of perception, whether to change the perception that people might have of you or to reinforce that perception that they might have, to shape attitudes, to create some level of awareness and so forth. It is important now more than ever in sport, both for organizations and potential sponsors. Companies and organizations involved in corporate social responsibility initiatives, they do it for many various reasons. And understanding this will help you to tailor proposals, activities, and initiatives to meet their needs. So a company might be looking to have an impact on their image, to be seen in a very positive light, to increase the goodwill, to connect or give back to the community, to make a positive social impact, as well as values-based and purpose-driven initiatives. And this is a trend globally where it's about creating a better community. It's about using sport to create a better world. And you hear that a lot now. So how can you use sport to make a positive impact on your community? What are your community's needs, and how can you use sport to meet those needs? So it might be something as simple as a club or an organization having a blood donation drive, or a Christmas hamper drive for the less fortunate, a school cleanup, a beach cleanup, being environmentally conscious, supporting cancer awareness, etc. Sponsorship has definitely evolved now. So we're moving away from purely awareness and fan engagement and amplifying reach to building better communities. So then you need to consider, what can my organization do to build my community? What can I as an athlete do to help build my community? And then these things are all events and initiatives that, if you so desire, because it isn't every initiative that you might want to be made public, depending on, for example, if you're dealing with the less fortunate, etc., you might want to withhold identities. But most of these initiatives can be covered by the media. And what it does is it helps to set you as an athlete or you as an organization apart, because people now don't only see you as the basketballer, but the basketballer who helps to donate gifts for children at Christmas. You already foster that goodwill. Or the organization that organizes a feeding or a food donation for the homeless. So now they see you as more than a basketball organization. And then there's some people who might not be interested in sport, but because they support the other cause that you might be involved in, then they get on board with you. You get that spin-off, and you create new fans and new followers, new supporters that way. Companies are also more likely to partner with organizations and individuals who do more than just sport, because it kind of saves them money too. Because if I can support a basketball team that also has an established breast cancer awareness program, it is almost like I'm getting double bang for my buck as a sponsor. So these things help to set you apart as an organization. And well-run organizations, or those perceived to be well-run, are more likely to attract sponsorship dollar. And these initiatives help your organization's image, and it makes you seem like a well-run organization. There's also community relations, as I said, and this is especially important in the Caribbean. These are long-term investments in community goodwill. So think about what activities or what initiatives that exist that you can partner with your community to foster good relationships. A good relationship between, as an athlete, you live somewhere, or you grew up somewhere, you went to school somewhere. So what can you do? How can you use your star power? How can you use your even manual strength, your expertise, your love of fitness, whatever it might be? How can you use whatever that strength or passion is to give back to your community? And that way you build goodwill, as well as you help to enhance your image in a favorable light. Athletes are often seen as role models in their various communities. They're admired, they're loved. So lending your voice to a particular cause or support for community initiatives can go a very long way. Increasingly, we're seeing the growth in athlete activism on a much larger scale as well, where athletes are using their platforms to speak out about racial, gender inequality issues. That is also something an athlete can consider, but it is something you need to do only if you genuinely believe in a cause. You don't want to see it as a bandwagon to jump onto, oh, this thing is topical, let me jump on this. Because remember, authenticity is key when you are talking about creating and managing your brand. Then finally, I'm just going to touch a bit on crisis communication, because a crisis can occur at any time. And crisis planning and communication are often overlooked areas of brand management, but you want to protect your image and your reputation at all costs, because you don't want, you went through all of this work to build up your brand, to have this favorable image, you have goodwill in the community, you're getting that visibility in the media. Then a crisis occurs, which can occur at any time, and all of that goes to naught. Even social media can be the source of a crisis. So therefore, planning for a crisis as an individual or an organization is very important. Crisis communications is a whole discipline area, specialty in itself. So I'll just give you a few key points. A crisis in this context is anything that can threaten a sport entity or individual's reputation, image, or perception. Because as an individual or an organization, your reputation or your image is one of your major assets. This is why a sponsor might want to partner with you. This is why people come up to watch you play. Excuse me. If a crisis does occur, you want to be able to resolve it as quickly as possible. You want to limit the damage, and you want to try, where possible, to restore your credibility. And if done well, managing a crisis well can also be an opportunity for you to come out of it with even more credibility and a more enhanced reputation than you had pre-crisis. So some basics in terms of managing a crisis. You need to acknowledge, okay, this is what happened. This is how we are going to address the situation. This is how we are going to resolve the problem. This is how whatever happened makes us feel. Express genuine empathy, whether it is regret, resolution, reform, restitution. And especially on social media now, you see a lot of these half-baked apologies, or apologies that are not really apologies. I'm sorry if anyone was offended by what I said, etc. No. If you're going to make an apology, you want it to be genuine, you want to express empathy, you want to be upfront about what happened. You must be honest and open. As an organization, you also want to show competence and expertise to appear as if you have a handle on the situation. You don't want to just bury your head in the sand and hope it all goes away. That's never a good strategy. You don't want to have contradictory messages out there for varying sources. And this is why developing that relationship with the media is also very key, because if a crisis occurs, you have your media contacts that you can go to directly and say, listen, this is what the situation is. You want to avoid releasing information too late. You don't want to come through after the fact and having to play cleanup. You also want to avoid an attitude of, I know what's best, I know everything, etc. Not in a crisis situation. You want to make sure you can respond real time to rumors, to myths, to dispel misconceptions. And social media is also a valid tool, or a very viable tool in handling a crisis, because immediately you can get out there and get that message across. You want to not only take the appropriate steps, very importantly, you want to be seen taking those appropriate steps. You want to be able to say the right things and be heard saying those things. And with that, thank you so much for your attention. And now we open the floor for any questions or comments that you might have. You can feel free to ask any questions or share any experiences or any challenges that you might have encountered with anything or going about anything that I might have mentioned here this afternoon. I'm not sure if Dania, you are asking a question. I'm not able to hear you very well. If you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so my question is, earlier on you spoke specifically about social media. What advice would you give to somebody if it appears that the algorithm, as I would say, is going against them after previously, I guess, pushing their content, but then maybe after some time you notice that the content is being shown to less and less people, and obviously that affects the engagement and the views, etc. How do you get out of that?
Honestly, it is a difficult situation to navigate because increasingly platforms are trending towards making money. So their aim is to try to get you to spend money. So they want you to use sponsored ads. They want you to do promoted posts and so forth. So while organic growth is what we will aim for, it is getting increasingly harder and harder to have that on some platforms, particularly Instagram. The Instagram algorithms are, they feel if they're getting worse and worse. So my advice would be, one, to keep being consistent, doing an audit of your platform to see which content tends to perform best, whether it is a static post, let's say use Instagram as an example, whether it is a picture with a caption, whether it is a video post, whether it is a reel, whether it was something in your status, as well as do an audit for the time of day you're posting. You might need to do some trial and error and some testing. Post at different times and see, on which days or at which times you might see increased engagement. Looking into hashtags as well, using topical hashtags or trending hashtags. And at some point in time, while we speak about social media being cost effective and it being free, to get the most out of it, you might have to spend some money. It's still good though, because let's say the reach you can get from 50 to 100 US dollars for a promoted post on Instagram, for example, in the Caribbean, you can't get that kind of mileage with or I should say, to get the equitable mileage on radio or television in your respective territory is going to be way, way, way more expensive. So even though it might not be absolutely free, maybe investing in some sponsored posts for some very key content would be helpful in terms of, okay, bumping you up the algorithm as it relates to engagement. If you use the different tools that analytics are available, look and see to the demographics, which age group does your content tend to appeal to most? Because who you might think is your key demographic might not be your key demographic. And then you might need to make changes based on that. So it might be a little bit of trial and error, a little bit of research, a little bit of testing certain things and seeing what works, and also investing in yourself a little bit with some sponsored or promoted posts and trying to build that traction there. But most importantly, being very consistent with your posts, as well as engaging in your comment sections and so forth. Also making call to actions, encouraging people to like, comment, share, what have you, or crafting posts in such a way that it gets them to like or to comment or to weigh in on a particular topic. Or it might not even be something sport related that can get the conversation going. It might be something about food, or it might be something about a particular song, anything that might be topical. Also, too, what I find helps is engaging with similar accounts. Or so let's say you are an athlete, engaging with athletes that are similar to your sport, and it doesn't have to be restricted to the Caribbean, globally, and building those relationships there. That way you tend to find you get a lot of cross followers and so forth, and sometimes then what happens, the algorithm will suggest your content to followers of that person as well. So these are all things you can do to help try to get that visibility. Okay, we have a question coming in here. At what age or level in your career should you begin to be aware of what you post as an athlete? Well, for me, if you have a social media account, you should be very conscious of what you post from the get-go. Because sometimes, even though that we delete stuff, the real internet sleuths might tell you that nothing is ever truly deleted. You know, a lot of these things are archived, they can be resurfaced. And even now you see it happening with a lot of entertainers and so forth. People are going back years and pulling old tweets or statements that might have been controversial and so forth. So from the get-go, you need to be cognizant of what you post, not only what you post, but also what you like and what you retweet or share, because sometimes likes, retweets, and shares are seen as endorsement. So while you might be retweeting something as a means of generating conversation, somebody might interpret it as you retweet it because you agree with it. So you need to be careful with that. Having said that, if you already have established platforms and profiles, particularly for young athletes looking to go off to scholarship and so forth, you really need to do that audit. Literally go through your profile and delete those things that might be questionable. For a lot of national federations now and Olympic committees, they also offer social media guidelines, particularly if you're selected to a national team. So that is also a consideration. There are things you can and cannot do as a national athlete, particularly on tour, on your social media platform. So these are all things you need to be aware of to find out, what if my association has any particular guidelines, or if my Olympic committee or my national federation. The Athlete 365 platform that I mentioned earlier, that IOC Athlete Hub is a very good resource for everything from social media, branding, etc. And I think it is open to most athletes. You just need to register and sign up, and you have access to all of the content. So I would encourage any athlete to sign up for that program as well. Right, as Sharnil mentioned here, there's that trend going on where people say something and then somebody goes back, 5, 6, 7, 8 years for an old post and caption it, is this you? You don't want to find yourself in a is this you situation. And the Caribbean is a very small environment. So we need to be even more careful about some of the things that we post and put out there. But again, that's not to sell doom and gloom, because I know sometimes it can seem very negative, but social media is also an invaluable tool, particularly for not-for-profit sporting organizations. Any other questions? Or any comments or anything anyone would like to share?
Do we have any other questions or comments? Well, I have a comment.
Shanil?
Daniel, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have one more question.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Yeah. What advice would you give, not Shanila, Marsha? What advice would you give to an athlete who probably is not that into social media, but they still want to have kind of the same impact as other more active social media users have in terms of attracting, sponsorship, attracting, different partnerships, etc. How else, apart from social media, how else, and a website, of course, because not everybody can afford it, but how else would you advise them to? Is Marsha still there?
Yes, I'm listening.
Oh, okay. Yeah, how else would you advise them to market themselves to the public and potential partners or sponsors?
That's a very good question, because we do accept that not everybody is into excuse me, social media. But on the flip side, you'll also find that companies, and we're in this influencer age, sometimes the first thing people ask, how many followers do you have? How many likes do you get, etc., before they're engaged in partnerships with you. But there are two options. One, if let's say, if you can afford it, or you have a willing volunteer, someone that you trust. A lot of athletes don't actually, and the higher up you go, the more you see. A lot of athletes don't actually manage their social media profiles themselves. They enlist people to do it for them. There are those who will hire firms and companies. There are those who might have a friend who's communication inclined, etc. And then those people are in charge of managing the content for them. So well, that's one avenue. If you have a friend who's really good at social media, loves that stuff, you can liaise with them and they can then post for you. If social media is totally off the table, it is going to be a little bit more difficult, but then you will have to lean a little bit heavier on traditional media and your community engagement. So you would need to be active in your community and be seen being active in your community, be seen supporting various causes and events, be seen doing interviews, doing, being a sports person, making presentations like this one, making speeches at schools, doing outreach. You would really have to focus on those types of activities to help build up a media persona as well as a public persona. So it becomes a little bit more active, so to speak. You have to do a lot more work in terms of generating that visibility. And if there are causes that you like, it becomes easier because it doesn't feel like a chore. You're not just doing it to generate visibility or, oh, I'm working on my brand. No, you are genuinely concerned about the environment. So you will support this beach cleanup, or you will support this recycling initiative, or you had a relative that passed away or was suffering from cancer. So you support breast cancer awareness and you actively support their activities and events, etc. You give back to your primary school, and it doesn't have to be monetary. Your time is also very valuable, and you would definitely don't need not to shy away from media interviews, speaking engagements, things like volunteering to give the vote of thanks at the association or club awards, building up that profile, because then what sponsors see, hey, Dania can handle herself in a media setting. Dania can handle herself in a news conference. Dania is well spoken. I like how Dania interacts with the community and so forth. She is someone that I think would be a good representative of our brand. And then you can build from there.
Thank you.
No problem. If there are no more questions, then Neil, I'll hand back over to you.
Yes, any other questions or comments? No? Well, overall, I enjoyed the session. I think it's very important for athletes to know what their brand is. Most people do not believe in brand or social media, but that plays a huge role on who you are as a person and the opportunities that you get in life. So always be wary of what you post, how you post, what you comment, because like Miss Boyce said, although you may not agree with with the opinion of the person who posted it, they may just associate it with you. So just be careful with what you do. So thank you everyone for coming.